Hey everybody, welcome back to our Velocity Sellers podcast. We've got a special episode for you all today because we've got a special guest. Everyone, please welcome Elizabeth Greene, the co-founder of Jungler and an Amazon advertising expert. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about Amazon advertising.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You said it, not me. I feel like so many people claim expert in the space. I've been doing it long enough. I probably could claim it for myself. I always like when somebody else hypes me up, so I appreciate it.
Happy to give you the hype. Joined by her is our own advertising expert, Chris Prawl, our not only advertising expert, but the director of our advertising here at Velocity. Guys, these two are the Kobe and Shaq, the Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins of Amazon advertising, the Venus and Serena Williams. You guys are in for a treat today. We're going to be talking a couple different things related to Amazon advertising, where it's going, some tips and tricks, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So first thing I want to talk about is I want to go into these new fees that are coming to Amazon, specifically the first one being this low inventory fee, and kind of how it affects Amazon advertising. Elizabeth, what are some of the things that maybe you're seeing already as this is just kicked off this month? What are you seeing that's affecting, advertising? It's really the Amazon space.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that it's affecting, which it feels like that's what every single fee affects, and that's why everybody gets a little bit worried when fees are rolling out, is margins. Let's be honest, it's a profit squeeze, and I definitely feel for sellers in this environment. Now, Amazon has grown exponentially, so the amount of sales and things and the traffic that is coming to the Amazon platform, there's definitely a bigger pie to be had, which means your slice, in theory, should get bigger. But with that comes a lot of other sellers recognizing that this is the place to be in e-com. And so a lot of increase in competition, which unfortunately means that sellers are getting squeezed from a lot of ends with the increase in the competitiveness and the cost of advertising, which is definitely something that we're well aware of, running a lot of advertising for brands. But then, also with all of the fees and the increases, bottom lines are getting squeezed as well, which means that sellers, it's a much more sophisticated and developed landscape these days. I got a question from just a friend, they know I'm kind of in the Amazon world. They're like, hey, is selling on Amazon still a viable thing? Can you still do? I said, yes, it absolutely is still a place that you can come in as a new seller and make a really good living for yourself. That being said, it takes a lot more startup capital these days, and it's a lot more competitive. No longer are the days of just throwing something up. And so these inventory fees are just kind of another layer onto that. And to be honest, it's a little bit terrifying sometimes when I talk to some brands. I'm like, hey, because your ads should reflect how you're running your advertising should reflect what kind of margins you have, right? If you have really slim margins, you need to be much more careful because you don't want to lose your shirt, versus if you have pretty healthy fat margins, maybe you can afford to play a little bit more aggressive with things. So that's one of the questions that we'll ask. And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I kind of feel like, please tell me you're tracking it, right? Like please tell me you know what you're doing, you know what's going on. And you'd be, again, it's kind of scary as to how many sellers are like, they don't track it, or maybe they annualize it at the end of the year. Like, oh yeah, we'll do the books at the end of the year and we'll figure it out. It's like, well, maybe you should have known what that was looking like when you started out Q1. I mean, at the very least, let's do it quarterly, probably monthly. Sit down, take a look. Where are we losing? Where are we winning? How can we play a better game? That's just a good business tactic, right? I don't care what business you're in. You need to know your margins. Amazon is no different. And so for those sellers who don't have a really good handle on what their margins already are, there's going to be some shakeups. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, no, I could see that being disastrous for anyone not tracking their margins, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm only making 20 cents a unit instead of, $3. What happened there? But absolutely. The other thing too is looking at kind of how this will affect directly, looking at maybe some advertising. So you said, yeah, obviously margin, but what about even if you're in peak season, right? And you're moving through inventory, and all of a sudden you're stock runs out or your stock gets to that point where you're being charged that fee, what can you kind of do to say, oh shoot, now should you pull back on advertising? Should you keep going and just try and get your orders fulfilled? What can a seller do there when that situation arises?
Yeah, definitely. So that's something we actually now use an analytics tool that we've been using for about 2 years. And part of that for us in getting access to that was one, just getting access, quicker analytics, more sophisticated analytics has been very helpful for us. But part of that has actually been inventory alerts, which has been very helpful for us. Now you would think, we're not a full service agency. We're simply an ad agency. Why do we have to be looking at profits and why do we have to be looking at inventory? The problem was when we were reliant on clients to let us know, hey, by the way, I'm going to run out of stock. We need to probably adjust advertising for this. They would tell us, they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to run out of stock tomorrow. And we're like, what? We've been building out all of these ranking campaigns because you told us this is your best seller and we're in a peak season. Like we went down this whole rabbit hole of like, manually checking, getting access to inventory reports. That was a whole thing. And now we have a system that says, hey, by the way, you're running advertising on these products that are set to run out of stock. Very, very helpful. So we do make sure that we have access to that information. So we don't build out a whole bunch of aggressive ranking campaigns for something that's going to run out of stock in 2 weeks. But with that, you need to be aware of it. You need to anticipate it. So you're looking at things like your run rate, meaning all of a sudden you peak season. Did your inventory level, did your sales spike? What does that look like in terms of your runway? How much of safety stock do you have? Are you well positioned? And then depending on what that looks like for the product, you can adjust your ads. And when I say adjust, it's a lot of it is spend control. Really, that's the biggest lever, the main lever you're pulling when it comes to advertising, regardless of what it is that you're building new campaigns. If you're doing optimizations, etc., it's saying what budget should I be spending given my margins, my product, my goals, and then where is it best spent. And when it comes to products running out of stock, my probably ad spend is not best spent on those products. And so I want to pull back on some level. Now we can get into like the nuances of how you pull back, where you pull back. Is it a budget? Is it a bid thing? The other thing I would say is you want to look at how long out of stock am I expected to be? That's actually a really big one. So for a client where they say like, okay, unfortunately, we're about to run out of stock. And you know what? Unfortunately, with our manufacturer, our lead times just got pushed out. We're probably going to be out of stock for 3 months. It's like, okay, so if we run aggressive rank campaigns, if we maintain our aggression here, we're going to completely lose all that momentum for 3 months. We're going to be starting from scratch. Let's go for profitability. Let's not be aggressive with our ads versus someone who goes, you know what? I think I'm going to run out of stock, but we've got a shipment coming in. It's currently being checked in. Just, something got happened. It's not currently checked into advertising. We're waiting for it. We anticipate maximum maybe like 2 days out of stock. We're like, okay, well, if we aggressively like prune out what we're doing with the advertising, then we're going to lose all that momentum and we're only going to be out 2 days. We feel like that's, we don't want to be so crazy with our pullbacks that we're scrambling to make up for it when we have inventory in 2 days, So it's kind of relative.
That's where that lead time is important too, because, if you get down to that 28-day limit for the low inventory,
yeah,
sometimes it might be better to actually push ads hard through it so you can stop that fee from continuing, as opposed to, pulling back and letting it go.
Yeah, it's going to be a balancing game. It's another challenge to figure out how to navigate.
Reminds me of one of the earliest things I learned about Amazon was the pinwheel or the flywheel example, that it's so much easier to keep that pinwheel spinning than it is to have it stop and then get it back going again.
Yes.
So I kind of see that playing into here as well, and just making sure that measuring out like what is the best move when you do approach any like out of stock issues. Looking at like longevity, how do we see this, Elizabeth? How do you see this factoring into maybe some of your plans? Don't give us any tip-top secrets, but
No.
How do you see this factoring into some of your advertising plans as the rest of 2024 goes on, and then next year and dealing with a whole year of this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're a pretty open book when it comes to strategy. We let you in on the strategy, we sell the execution. Classic line, but I'll steal it. Yeah, so it's really like helping us understand how this is affecting margin for our brands, and then making sure, one, just helping our sellers navigate it. As much as we're strictly an Amazon ad agency, and so that means we don't touch a lot of areas of the business. That's by design, so we can niche down and say, hey, we're really, really good at this one thing. And if that's the piece you need to plug into your business, we're the people for you. But we do have a lot of our brands, kind of leaning on us for strategy, because ads touch so many other facets of the business and should be adjusted for so many other facets of the business. So we do have a really good handle on, we try and, build out advertising strategies based on more of a holistic picture. And of course, margins are part of that. So it's going to be a lot of like looking at how the margins affect. And this is just how my brain works. So it's kind of how I've led and coaching the team, is like looking at the numbers and then calculating what the possibilities need to be, or what are the actual like dollar values look like. So that would look like your advertising. When you're talking profitability as it relates to advertising, you're probably tracking total A costs, right? And so total A cost is a really great benchmark against your profitability. If you want to do really rough napkin math, like get a tracker, do it right. But if you want to do napkin math, you can say, okay, I have a 30% margin on my products. My total A cost is 15%. So therefore 30 minus 15, I got a 15% margin on my overall after advertising. Yeah. Track it like incrementally, but if you wanted to, so that's kind of like the relation there, right? So it's saying like, what percentage of my total margins am I taking to spend on my advertising? But what I will find is that, and again, this is where we come in as an ad partner, but a lot of times brands will say, I need to lower total A costs, because all they're doing is they're looking at, they probably have some sort of calculations, or they're doing their books and they're saying, oh, I don't have as high profitability as I want. My net profits are not where I need them to be. So therefore, I need you to lower total A costs. And I have had some conversations with some of our brands looking at it, and it's just, unfortunately, a lot of the directives are, I need to lower. And we're like, so then my question back is always, well, by how much, by what? And sometimes they don't know. And so what we've done as a favor to a couple of our brands, because it takes, it's outside the scope of work, let's be honest. But like we pull cost of goods for our sellers, and we will pull profitability levelers. And we had a particular client who we were just looking at the net margins at the end of the month. We weren't, we're saying, and when we were looking at our total A cost and what we were achieving, like we were achieving like a 6% total A cost, and yet the margins still weren't there. It was still negative on this one product line, not the account as a whole, but the product line. And I'm like, I don't know how much else we can, like 6% total A cost in this market. Like, let's be honest, the account manager was crushing it. And so to help them kind of figure that out, we went through, because again, we can pull P&L statements for our brands. Obviously we don't have operational costs, but we have everything else, before that. And we're looking at it and we're saying, okay, actually on this one product line, did you realize that this one product line only has a 5% margin on it? And they're like, oh, no. I'm like, well, look, it's your inventory fees. It was an oversized product. Shipping fees, the cost of goods were really high on this product. It was really heavy, it was bulky. And I'm like, even with margins that slim, to be honest, I don't think there's like, it's not an ad problem. It's a margin problem. And so I think, unfortunately, what a lot of sellers are going to run up against is they're going to look at it as an ad problem when they look at the P&L. And I mean, fingers crossed, hopefully not, but potentially see like a negative or see some really, really scary impacts to the bottom line. They're going to say, oh, it's an advertising problem, so therefore correct for that. So I'm always a huge advocate of, one, just looking at the cold hard numbers, calculating your actual profit numbers before advertising. Take out advertising spend. It's really easy. If you have a P&L statement, all you do is you take out, okay, what was the ad spend? And you just add that back in, to the bottom line, and say, what would it have been if I did not spend advertising? Which we all know, you completely eliminate advertising, your sales are not going to be what they are. There's that dynamic. But it's just looking at, like, again, so it's saying like, how much wiggle room do I have? And again, that's going to relate to your total A cost metrics. And then the other thing that you want to do is, for a lot of these brands, even if the wiggle room isn't that great on profitability, I'm not saying that doesn't mean ads don't need to be adjusted for that. They absolutely do. So if you're going to say, I need to lower total A costs, my question would be, by how much? Let's give us a dollar value. And sometimes calculating that dollar value and the difference from where you are to where you want to be paints a really clear picture as to how easy or how hard that road is going to be. So here's what you would do. You would say, okay, if I want to, in the case of, the 30 and 15% margin, I want to make a 15% margin on my products. Okay, that means my total A cost number has to be 15%. If I'm currently running at a 20% total A cost, it means I have to lower it by 5%. But lowering spend by 5%, percentages can throw you off. It could be $50 decrease in your spend. It could be $4,000 decrease in your ad spend. It depends on your budgets. So what I would do is I would say, okay, I need a difference of 5%. What is 5% of my total sales right now? What does that look like? Or you could say, if you wanted to do the differences here, you could say, okay, I'm at a 20%, which is take total sales, multiply that by 20%. I'm currently spending X. Okay, if I want to hit a 15%, I would take total sales, multiply that by 15%, and then you look at the delta. And oftentimes what would happen, and so then the question then becomes, instead of saying, I need to lower, which is like, it feels ambiguous where, what, how, like it's much less concrete. Then you can say, okay, I need to, because if we're lowering total A costs, it's ad spend divided by total sales. So total sales must remain the same and ad spend needs to lower to make that different. If ad spend goes down and total sales go down, you're going to end up with the same number, just less of it because you have less total sales. And so then your question says, if you do that, say delta, say, okay, the difference here is $500. So my goal now is to maintain the same sales and lower my ad spend by $500. Can I find somewhere in the account where a decrease of $500 is not going to hurt total sales? That becomes much more concrete in your actions. Or if I did that calculation and the brand said, all right, we want to grow by 10% this year and we want to cut our budget, we want to get down to a 15% total A cost. As an ad manager, I can do that calculation, say, okay, you're asking me, and then do the multiplication. When they say grow by 10%, how much is 10%? For some brands, 10% is going to be, maybe 10 grand or so. For some brands, a 10% lift is going to be like $1 million. So you say, okay, you want me to grow the brand by $1 million and spend 20,000 less than I am right now. Is that what you're asking of me? And then that road's a lot harder. So you look at, again, where am I now? What are the concrete numbers I need to get to? What is the difference? And then you can look at the ad account and say, okay, can I find that difference somewhere?
And Chris, looking at it from like a whole agency perspective, not just advertising like Elizabeth, where do we see a lot of this stuff come in? I mean, obviously, we're the ones saying to them like, hey, we got to send in this much. We're doing the strategy for them, and kind of where can we say to them, these are our partners and these sellers, hey, instead of maybe, like you said, cutting ad budget by 20 grand and expecting us to make $1 million, like, you can maybe do this instead, or just other solutions to kind of work around these fees.
Well, luckily, yeah, we've got a good inventory team. And so like my communication with them has now increased significantly. Yeah. It used to be inventory was kind of just over there, like they tell when we're out of stock or something. But now it's going to be, we actually have developed a whole entire system with, Google Sheets with color coding. And, so we know when stuff is going to start to go out of stock, so we can start pulling back ads or whatever. And then as far as the profitability goes, I feel like I've been having that same exact conversation with a lot of clients recently. I mean, just last week, we had a fairly decent-sized client of ours, corporate structured. You'd think they'd know their margins. I was like, well, let's set targets for each one so we can go on an itemized level and do this right. And they're like, we don't actually know what our margins are.
Oh,
so
no.
I'm going through and breaking down all their margins for them now and giving recommendations, which was surprising to me because, the 3 years that we've been with them, I just figured they knew their margins. But yeah, so we're learning a lot about, how businesses came onto Amazon and their planning or lack thereof in some cases, I guess. And then, yeah, I would recommend, I've found some situations like that where I would actually recommend, can you shop around for a new source, in some instances? Because like I discovered that they were at 95% COGS and fees of the sales before we even got to any ad dollars spent. And I'm like, you're not going to be profitable no matter what you do. You're not going to be able to sell on this at this price point, So either I raise price, will that put you out of market, or find a different source? Maybe, if you're not going through, if you're going through the middleman in China instead of the actual manufacturer, there's things we can look into like that.
Yeah. Yeah, Elizabeth, like you said, this extra layer is going to be very interesting for, and not even just advertising, like you said, Chris, like every single department is going to have to say, okay, like thinking about the departments in our section, maybe aside from content, but like our strategies are going to have to be different too. I mean, looking at, okay, we cannot run out of stock. Like before, obviously that's in my opinion, one of the biggest issues you can have on Amazon is when it's like my product's out of stock, I can't sell it. I'm not making, I'm losing rank on it. I'm not increasing my rank on it. That's the biggest issue. Now it's even more so because not only am I, like I said, losing rank, you're losing money. You're getting charged money for not being in stock. So what's that phrase? Everything's on full steam. I don't know. Everything has to be moving connectively. And like Chris, you said, you got to be talking to logistics and saying, okay, do I have to pull back on advertising? Logistics has to say to maybe strategy, like, hey, like stop running that coupon that's on there, or like make that price maybe like a couple cents higher to see if we can slow down traffic there. Whole bunch of stuff that I feel like has to be all the pieces have to be moving together. Maybe that's it to really make this not a disaster. It sounds like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the same. Like, my thought about it, because everyone talks about the glory days of Amazon, and back in the day when you could throw up anything and do all this, the wild west. I'm like, yeah, but like you should have known your margins then. Like business, like good business practices haven't changed. It's just your margins were padded enough. The competition wasn't as scary. You could get away with it. You can get away with running it loosey-goosey. Nowadays, if you run it loosey-goosey, you could not even know that you're going to go bankrupt in a couple months until all of a sudden all that stuff hits. And I mean, like we've talked to some brands who they've been running, great numbers. Everything looks great. We're running ads super lean. Everything's good. And then they come back to us. And of course, they're looking at further costs than just their profits. They're also looking at, their cost of running their business, warehousing. There's lots more things that go into it. And they're like, we're in single digit margins this year for the first time ever. And that's scary, especially when you have a business like e-com where a lot of your money is tied up in inventory, like, and you have to have that money for reorders. You have to have the income to keep the wheels spinning. So it's becoming more and more easy, if you don't keep an eye on it, for it to get out of control really, really fast.
Like you said, you can't be loosey-goosey anymore. It does kind of shock me. I know we talked about this a lot, but it does kind of shock me that most companies don't know their margins. It's even more shocking, well, not really shocking for us, I guess, being Amazonians. But when I tell people like, hey, Amazon between all the fees is probably going to eat about a third of your margin. And they're like, what? Yeah. Like they get all shocked by that. Like, what do you think? It's just free to access Amazon's billions of customers? No. But yeah, margins are becoming even more important as the years go on, and will continue to do that as I'm sure Amazon adds a bunch of other new fees that we have to kind of work around.
We hope not. But we will see. We'll definitely have to see.
Yeah, now you almost have to come on with like a full 40%, before ads to even stand a chance. Where back in the day, you could run a fairly decent profit at 25 coming in, or 30, and now you need that wiggle room for sure.
Switching gears a little bit to a good change, or a nice, maybe a little bit more, not so much good. I guess it is good. Easier on the wallet changes. Amazon is changing a little bit of the referral fee for apparel. So I just looked up the numbers to fact check myself. They're changing items that are priced below $20. So for things that are priced under $15, they're changing their referral fees from 17% to 5%.
Wow.
So a 12% decrease there. Yeah. And then for anything priced in between 15 and 20, it's decreasing from 17 to 10. So still a pretty big decrease per item. So this is also going to be great for if you sell apparel. Obviously, it's I guess it's not really a small category, but compared to the rest of the categories, it's one section on Amazon. But this is still going to be a huge, huge margin increaser. I think Amazon was saying they're trying to compete with companies like Shein and Temu, the second phase Wish.com stuff. And they're doing this to, again, give sellers a little bit of a break, and to say, okay, if you want, you can decrease your prices to like Shein and Temu prices, so people don't go there. They still come to Amazon. So knowing this, Liz, like, where do you see this going for advertising in the apparel space? How does this affect margin and really just budgets overall?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, because one of the functions of ACOS, or total ACOS for that matter, would be price point, right? Really, the linear functionality is how many clicks am I getting? How much is each of those clicks costing? So that's your ad spend. And then at the end of that, to make up the whole ACOS equation, ad spend divided by total sales, how much am I making at the end of that sale? Which, if your cost per clicks are remaining high, but then you've lowered your price point, maybe that gets better. Of course, it also is a function of the conversion rates, right? So when I'm making those clicks, how many of those clicks are converting? The less clicks I have to make to convert, well, then, the less I'm paying per sale. And so that could be, so I think it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out long term. I definitely think it's a good move. Those other apps are definitely on the rise. I think a lot of in part to just dumping a crap ton of money into their advertising campaign. So we'll see if that's really propping them up or not. I would say I definitely know Shein is moving well into the clothing space. As a consumer, I'll raise my hand and be honest, I have used Shein. I have used Amazon as well. But I tried to get into Temu. That one's way too spammy for me. Again, this is one consumer's opinion on it. Gosh, all the notifications and this, I'm like, this just feels like a scam. Where Shein has a little bit more shopping, the shopper experiences a little bit. And fun fact, just because I happen to have consumed the product before, Shein actually has a really good Amazon-like return policy, which I think has helped them. I'm not sure if Temu does as well. Again, to me, I haven't shopped on that one. It feels a little bit scammy to me. It feels like I'm going to lose money. The other one, I happen to know they actually have pretty decent customer service and return policies, which I definitely know has been one of Amazon's competitive advantages. So long term, we'll see what that shakes out to be. But I do think it's a good play on Amazon's part.
And Chris, what do you think? Same thing? I mean, like, how does this going to maybe affect some of I know we have some apparel people. Like, are you seeing any changes already for this in their advertising? What are some, do you have any real life examples for us either?
Not really yet.
I'd love to. Not
yet, really. Because clothing's going to be tough because it's already narrow margins a lot of times, or smaller, lower price points. So, that percentage off is nice, but how much it will actually affect my ability to spend more money, we'll see when we get down to it, especially with the cost per clicks going up, and if it'll offset it or not enough to make a difference, because, I know people have ordered off Shein especially, but, and the quality is good, and we get it cheap. So it's going to be tough for Amazon to compete with them, I think, but Amazon's a household name, so they've got that going for them.
They're trying their best. I know, Liz, like you said, Temu, I don't know how they already have enough money for a Super Bowl ad. They had, I think 2 or 3 of them too, which is crazy to think about how much that costs for this website that sells, again, in my opinion, it's like a Wish.com repeat of just this is just crappy stuff that, I hate to say that kids get scammed into buying it. I feel like most of the time they're going to put ads on Instagram and TikTok, and they're going to get 12-year-olds with their mom's credit card. They're saying, oh, I want to buy this. And comes in, it's beat up box, it's broken, all this stuff. I don't know. I don't want to slander them.
That's how I found out about Temu.
Maybe if they do have great products, cool. But is what your daughter?
Yeah, I didn't know about Temu until I saw on my phone, because I get her email notifications and a bunch of Temu stuff, and I was like, oh.
Okay.
Was it good? Did you see the stuff? That's the products?
Yeah, I think it was all. I mean, but what she was ordering was already going to be cheap anyway. So I can't judge.
All right. Well, yeah. So this is, again, there's a lot of other features coming. I know we talked mostly about the big ones. I definitely wanted to cover the apparel and the short-term storage fees and a couple of the other ones. But this was great. Like I said, I think this is going to be huge, and I think you guys would agree that this is going to be very impactful for the rest of 2024 and beyond on not only just maybe your margins. If you don't know them, go figure them out. But also advertising budget, looking at where you're spending and how you're spending that money. Going back a little bit to the next topic I wanted to talk about was definitely some new features, Liz, that I don't know if you had a chance to check out, but there's been a couple different things that we've been experimenting with here that Amazon has put out. One of them being these AI images for sponsored brand products. Have you used that? Have you seen success with them? I think they're super neat. We did one on the podcast. We did one live with
cool.
Phoebe. And that was really like, oh, wow. Like it was so cool to see. Like, she was like, oh, like take the buildings out, put grass in. Like, it's just and I'm very amazed by AI, despite being I guess I'm Gen Z. Despite being a 24-year-old that's technologically advanced, I'm still amazed by what it can do. So seeing Amazon work this stuff in, where do you see this kind of moving forward? And again, do you see success with it already?
Yeah, so we have been using it. It's a really good asset, especially because Amazon moved to requiring lifestyle images for doing brands. They made that switch and said like, hey, if you don't have a lifestyle image, and by the way, we're going to stop serving up impressions to you. Then that announcement was made after they made the rollout of the AI images, which I thought that was smart thinking on their part, because some brands, if you're getting started up, sometimes it's difficult to get those lifestyle images, or you might not have the money for the photo shoot, and AI becomes a really, really good option there. And like you were saying, sometimes it does it really good, and then sometimes it's not so great. It honestly, what we found is really dependent on the main image of the product. So we had one client, they sell the results were hysterical. They sell puzzles, but they have so the main image is like the graphic of the puzzle, and that's pretty much all it is, with obviously the puzzle outlines to it. And when Amazon had nothing but and they have some psychedelic puzzles, when Amazon has nothing but that main image, the results were hysterical. And I couldn't get it to be anything that I would ever want the public to see. So there will have some weird nuances like that where, just from an image like that, it might be a little bit difficult for them to fully understand what that means or how that should look like in a lifestyle. But I would say for the majority of products, you will find that these images actually perform very well. We have tested some of them. I'm on par with, a lot of other, well done graphics. If you have better graphics, great. But sometimes AI can create things that you wouldn't have thought of. And where these also kind of shine is on occasion you would hear, or when holiday season comes up, you hear a lot of people talking about it would be great to adjust your images, to anticipate holiday seasons. If you have a giftable product, if you're coming up on Mother's Day, or all of these other times where in the past we would have to ask your brands, or even if you have a creative team, you say hey, we need all of these creative assets, which takes time. And especially if you have a ton of different products and you have a ton of different, ideally you would want it specific to each variation or the variations that you're advertising, and you might want to develop it dynamically, which that's a pretty big lift for any sort of creative team. But now with the help of AI, it becomes quite easy. And the fact that you can go into existing brand campaigns, edit the image using AI, play around, see can I get my holiday campaign images up, and then run those. It becomes a much less daunting of a task, much quicker of a task, which we're really appreciating.
Yeah, the seasonal options in the AI thing is cool too. You can just switch right to Christmas or switch right to Valentine's Day or whatever. Yeah, it makes quick work.
I think we did it right around Valentine's Day, and I was like, did they have a Valentine's Day image? It was perfect. It was sort of like a necklace. It was like, oh guys, check this out.
Great.
Comes in a nice box. There's little hearts in the background. It was really cool.
Nice.
So yeah, I definitely see that, especially because you can use them on your listing too. It's not just in the ads. You can download that image and say, oh, here you go. I know there's a couple other things with content coming too, with Amazon saying, hey, third parties, if you see that your item that you're selling is not up to date, feel free to add in bullet points and feel free to add in images. So that's going to be really good to make sure that third parties don't do that.
Really, really interesting.
I don't know what they're thinking with that one. I'm not going to lie. I get that they want to have the customer experience be the best it possibly can be. But I think they should just say to the brands that are brand registered, to say to them, hey, add more images, not to just say to these third parties, hey, go. That's Wild Wild West stuff.
Yeah.
It's hey, is this cow's not branded? Go ahead and take your branding iron and put it on whatever cow you want. Other Wild West references, I don't know. But yeah, I just think that's going to be an interesting one. So this is a good tool to help you say, to defend against that and say, do not add your images to my
Yes.
products.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
another one we checked out, Chris, was that really cool new way to kind of view all of your products, especially if you have big catalogs, and to see, hey, are these being advertised on? Are these, how are they doing? Like really real-time viewing of the metrics. Liz, have you seen that screen at all? And Chris, what have we done with that? Have we seen that on multiple accounts? Is that still kind of in beta? I really like that screen, especially the part about, again, adding your ASINs to campaigns that are not already in one.
Oh yeah, I like that tool. It's probably one of my favorite ones. It's such a little thing. It's very ad specific. Like, like I don't think clients would ever get involved with that thing, but just being able to see real quick when you have a big catalog what you're not advertising on, and being able to add it in right from there is just it's sweet. It's better than having to download advertised product reports and compare it to the reports from the business reports and see what you're missing. It's just right there.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I on occasion will go down the rabbit hole with certain things that Amazon, and actually, fun fact, a lot of those views, like, so how there's the whole video views, it's like what percentage of the video is viewed inside the ad console. They have all those metrics which like never populate, which is kind of weird. Like they gave us all these metrics and then like there's no data behind them. But those were actually available in the advertising partner network. So I went down the rabbit hole when we first got access to the advertising partner network from Amazon. And the view on ASINs, the thing is, like with Amazon, sometimes those things are like kind of hard to navigate. So it was like you went down this rabbit hole and like every time you tried to find it again, you're like, wait, where was that button? So it wasn't very user friendly. I did kind of showcase it to the team because, to your point, like being able to look across your catalog, where am I not advertising, immediately get an ad up for it. Like there's a lot of value in that. So I did share it with the team who had access to it, and they were like, it was so hard to find and so clunky and so out of the usual workflow that I don't think anyone really took advantage of it. Where now they have it available inside Ad Console. It's much more user-friendly, much more in your usual workflow, and I find it really valuable. So I do appreciate a lot of the more recent rollouts.
Yeah, I've definitely seen them. I poked around a little bit myself, not too much because, I'm obviously not on the ads team, but it just seems like it's just more, especially with some of the other rollouts I've been doing for like the inventory page, kind of the same thing where it'll show you the metrics right there. That just seems like that should have been right at the beginning of launch. But, again, what can you do? We're moving forward, so it's good. What was the other really cool thing that I wanted to ask you both about, Chris, was about the sponsored TV. TV was the other one. I was like, whoa, what?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know obviously Amazon has the Prime Video that they're now charging ads for. Or they're putting ads on. They're charging you to take the ads off, which is questionable at best. But I know we talked a little about this on our episode about ads, but where are we seeing that come into play? Like, I know that you said that was more for established partners, but can we get into a little bit about sponsored TV and where, we can maybe use that?
Yeah, I mean, on our end, we're mostly for our bigger brands that have quality videos. Like that's kind of the most important thing. I want TV commercial quality video. And then also that have the money to throw at it, because a $20 minimum per day, which isn't even going to get you as many really impressions as you'd want. I would prefer to stick 100 plus edited a day per campaign. And so, it's just straight top of funnel exposure. So it's definitely not for everybody, but definitely bigger brands or anybody that just wants to invest in that type of exposure. I haven't seen a ton of great return on it, but, maybe the whole halo effect and everything will come through for me. I haven't been running too many of them for that long, though, so I don't have a ton of data on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it says more like top of funnel, right? Just for exposure, say, hey, look at our product. So
yeah, we have about the same. We did, one of the reps reach out to us and say like, hey, well, we'll give a credit to your brands if they're going to keep it up and running. So we, of course, threw that out to our brands and said, hey, if we can get an ad up for you, within this date range, we can. Half of the brands didn't even want to take advantage of it. I was like, it's free money. They're like, ads, too hard to get the creative out. It's kind of a pain, and maybe next time. So they didn't end up hopping on it. A couple of our brands did, and so we, of course, tested it out for them. Same thing, it's a bit more top of funnel, which just depends on the brand you're talking to. If they're larger and they're more interested in running top of funnel, then they might be more happy with the results. A lot of brands, I think, are kind of, which again, we've been talking margins, right? Like, you want to have a good solid business. You want to be thinking your margins top of funnel has a little bit, you're not going to get as good an ROI from it. Let's be honest. It's more of a long-term play. Some brands can afford that. Some brands want that. Some brands are like just really bottom line focused. And for those, it's not going to make much sense. And I can respect that. So again, minimal tests, not like a ton of feedback. I get mostly because for a lot of our brands, it didn't make sense to run aggressive tests. So, we're kind of minimally testing it. Same thing, I think the video creators, I myself, we watch Amazon TV. I also share your sentiment on a ton of different like ads on there. And then like, so you have all the, this is a total tangent, but my husband, we were watching stuff last night and he's like, every single thing that's any good that has been out for like 10 years, I still have to pay to watch the dang movie. And then I also have to pay for these other It's like, I thought I was just subscribing to get all access like Netflix. But no, it feels like you're being nickeled and dimed every single second. But so we've run across the ads where it's like, some of them you're like, oh, that looks cool. And then some of them you're like, that's an Amazon seller. Like it's a little bit not that great. I mean, there is a QR code that you can scan to purchase the product. So I think, there is some like direct correlation there. That was one of the questions that one of our brands had, like, hey, are people going to actually purchase, or is it just going to be like, look at this product? So there is, if anyone is intrigued enough to pull out their phone, there would technically be like an immediate path to purchase, but are people going to be interested? You're interrupting them, not in a buying cycle. Yeah, it is a more top of funnel play.
You got to have a crazy alluring product to say to someone, hey, let me interrupt your show so you can spend money on this thing that you probably don't need. Check it out. I feel like a lot of people would be like, maybe later, not right now. So interesting, man. Well, yeah, there are a lot of, I feel like a lot of things that Amazon is putting out for quality of life purposes. And so I'd love to talk about any of the other ones that maybe you've seen, Liz, that have been coming out recently that, again, Amazon has said, hey, advertisers, here's this to make your life easier.
Negative targeting inside of sponsored display ads. That's a rollout as of, I just checked it today to make sure it was true. Somebody notified me in my circle. He was like, hey, I found this now, which was like, 3 days ago or something. So it's a really, really new rollout. They released what do they call it? The match targeting report. They didn't call it a search term report. It's essentially a search term report for sponsored display ads. That's been out for a while, but it felt really annoying because they'd be like, hey, look, here's all these terms you're getting a ton of clicks on and no sales. Nothing you can do about it. And you're like, thanks, Amazon. Now I can just stare at this waste and be mad about it. But now you actually have a way to take action on it. So that's kind of nice.
That was 3 days ago, you said? Sure, it wasn't an April Fool's joke? I
got notified of it. I did check it today. I was like, all right, I heard this was a thing. I told the team it was a thing. I should probably go check it out. Make sure it's a thing.
I got really good by a post by John Elder, and I don't know why I didn't. I don't think I'm very gullible, but I guess apparently I am. I don't know. But John Elder posted something about like Amazon's going to remove all Chinese sellers from the platform. It's going to be 40% of their listings are going to be removed, and I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. And then I was like, oh, it's April 1st. He got me.
No, they can't be any worse than Kevin King put out this whole thing on how there was this new AI empowered thing that was going to do like review manipulation, and it had like a self-destruct button in case it was really you're like, I cannot. No, dang it, got me.
That's what I thought too. I put that in the director's feed. I saw that thing and I was like, wait. And then I got to think about, wait, it was April Fool's. And I wasn't sure if it was real or not because it kind of seems like it could be.
You never know, man. I hope it didn't give anyone any ideas.
Yeah. I guess I feel like I'm not gullible, but I feel like I got got by a lot of those this year. This year especially, I was looking at like Instagram and I don't want to call it Twitter because it's X. And I was like, this is like, what? Like, what do you mean there's like big breaking news for X, Y, and Z? Like
geotargeting that came and then vanished right before. We even did a whole podcast on geotargeting and then it just vanished. Like the next day it was gone.
Oh, yes.
Can't believe that. I can't believe that. I
Yeah.
think that someone said that was a mistake. Chris, did you say that? I think you told me that
Yeah.
was like a mistake that they released it by accident or something. Or like,
Yeah,
what do
it
you think
wasn't
happened
supposed to
there
be for
with like, why
everybody.
don't we
Yeah.
have that? I would have been
I know, we were all excited.
such a
All of
good
us are
sales
like, "Yes,
pitch.
this is
Yeah.
amazing." Oh, wait, just kidding, guys.
We've got so many clients and I could say, hey, like,
Yeah.
we can target your cool umbrellas in Florida all year
Yeah.
round. Instead of pushing harder where it's, today here it's like 30 something degrees and we're getting a foot of snow. I'm not going to be looking for an umbrella, no offense. And so water under the bridge, Jeff
You would
Bezos,
think they're
bring that back.
constantly telling us we need to run more sponsored display ads. There was legitimate reason for all of us to heavily push sponsored display ads, and they took it away from us. It feels like they're working against themselves there, but
Yeah. Like I said, I like that feature ever since we learned about it being a thing, like way back. Like, oh, like what if we did, or like even this like a concept, like what if we did geotargeting? That's such a cool idea for. I mean, I think it would benefit Amazon too to have like, oh, like instead of pulling back on our advertising because we're a summer product, we can keep this going all year round, and Amazon gets more money and blah blah blah. I don't know why they wouldn't do it. Maybe it needs more fine tuning.
potentially.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, that is a great segue into the next segment. That's funny. That I wanted to talk about was looking at the future, looking at speculations for what you think is coming up in the rest of 2024, pertaining to Rufus and this new AI tool and kind of how that's going to affect advertising. Where do we see keywords going? Where do we see ranking going? Is this going to be the end of keywords kind of thing? So, Liz, what are you seeing? What do you think?
Yeah, this is coming at a good time. I just went down the rabbit hole with this yesterday because one of the clients asked, so I filmed a YouTube video on it, currently being edited. But it also ties in and mirrors what Amazon's currently doing in their advertising, as far as it feels kind of like their attempt to do away with match types in a way. I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole, but the way that Rufus is going to work currently, now it's currently in beta. Actually, if you go to Amazon, they have a blog post. There's a lot of articles written on it. I recommend going directly to the blog post because everybody's pretty much regurgitating everything Amazon said. Get it straight from the source. And they actually have a YouTube video that demonstrates how the current rollout of Rufus is going to work. So at least short term, it's going to be a tandem thing. So a lot of people talking about AI and search, like, oh, is AI going to get rid of search? Potentially long term, it might. I don't know. But right now, the way it's being rolled out, which I think is a very clever way of doing it, is it's an additional search function option. So when a user goes into Amazon and types in a search, they'll be prompted to potentially follow up with, some more language model questions to ask Rufus or the AI to help them better find the product. If they're having a poor experience with it, or they just want to use their traditional search option, you can choose to click away from it. So it's not completely getting rid of search. It's not swapping out for search. It's an enhancement of search. And how this works is there will be prompted questions from, very similar to if you go to a chat GPT or other ones, it'll offer you some prompt questions. So my guess is it's going to continuously harness, whatever the most common questions are asked of it. And in the example, I think they use like a coffee maker. So the shopper could ask like, oh, what's the easiest to clean? I need one with a warm option or something. And so the goal of this is to help the shoppers find the products that better suits their actual needs quicker and more efficiently. And I think that's a really good move on Amazon's part. Now, what is this going to mean in terms of sellers and rank? Time will tell. If you read any of the articles which are written from an outside perspective, which probably have a little bit more of a perspective of like just a day-to-day shopper than it does us who are like ingrained and know all the want to know all the details of how things are going to work. The general sentiment in kind of more the academic or article space is that Amazon's just going to flood this with ads, because if you look at their platform, it's all ads right now, and that's kind of the general sentiment of like shoppers right now. Is everything feels like it's advertising. We know Amazon's getting a lot of money from advertising, and part of me kind of wonders, is there going to be some sort of advertising placement in this? I don't know. I think if Amazon was going to do that, they would have to be very careful that it's not going to completely ruin, sort of the shopper experience here. And actually, when I was going down the rabbit hole with this, and again, kind of thinking through and again, filming the YouTube video, we deal in clothing, or I see this in clothing a lot. If you have like a scientific product or some more like technical widget type products, the Amazon search, and due to its focus on positive past shopper search or past consumer like positive history, meaning things like conversion rates, click-through rates, add to carts, because they focus so heavily on that, what I've actually found from a consumer perspective is the current algorithm is quite hamstrung when it comes to serving up very specific shopper search queries. So the example I used was I typed in a search like women's, a black button up with bell sleeves. There's like 3 qualifiers there. I wanted bell sleeves, I wanted button up, I wanted black. If you type in that search in Amazon, maybe the top 1 or 2 products, but as you scroll down the page, it gets farther and farther and farther away from that very defined search. And actually, if you look at the ads associated with that, none of them fit the criteria. Some of them weren't even black. And as I went further down the page, I'm getting patterns. I think like the very 4th organic rank option had a short puff sleeve. It didn't even fit one of the defined criteria. And actually, the funny thing is if you go into Google, you type in the same search and you go to Google Shopping, you will find that if for very defined specific criteria searches, the Google algorithm actually does a much better job of serving up those specific products. And as a consumer, again, I'm a girl, I shop clothing. So I'm like, I want this very defined thing. I know with all the sellers on Amazon, with the wealth and the breadth of their catalog, I know you guys have like 20 different options that are slight variations on this one thing that I'm trying to find. But because a lot of those products maybe have no sales history whatsoever, they have no shopper interaction search history whatsoever. And so finding them on Amazon is impossible, is what I've found. So the way that Rufus, again, if you go in and you read the documentation on their blog post, what they say is that the AI is going to scrape. Now, again, you need past positive search history for this, so we'll see how this goes. But it's going to scrape your listing data. It's going to scrape your back-end search terms. It's going to scrape your reviews. It's also going to scrape the Q&A. So Q&A is important on the listings. And it also says that it's going to scrape other information on the web, where that is that blog post, is that something, is it going to look at shop? Again, we will have to see when this rolls out. The document, it's very ambiguous. But my understanding is the theory is to say, we know it's a little bit difficult for you to find, or, for if I'm searching for a coffee maker that I want to make sure it's really easy to clean, I got to go through every single listing. And if they don't directly say, hey, this is a really easy to clean product, if that's not a feature they've called out in their listing, I don't know if it's the right product for me. Maybe it's buried really deep in the Q&A section somewhere where someone said, hey, is this easy to clean? And 5 people piped up and said yes. But as a shopper, that's tedious for me to find. Don't waste my time. I don't want to have to do that. So the idea of Rufus is to get to the products that are directly what the shopper is looking for and their specific needs. So in theory, if it works the way they say it's supposed to, which we all know with AI, sometimes it's a little bit funky, but it sounds like it will be a good consumer experience. What that means for advertising and search, I think that's something we'll just have to see after it rolls out.
Yeah. And Chris, what do you think? Same thing? I mean, about looking at, is this really going to be the death of keywords, to be as dramatic as possible about it?
I don't think so. I think it'll be the death of index expansion. I think everything should be indexed just pretty much right up front by the AI if it's doing its job properly. As far as keywords, I mean, there still is a link there, that has to be bridged between the search, no matter what if you're typing in AI, you're typing in the search bar, it's still keywords that are going to make this link, because you want that coffee thing that's easy to clean, right? So that those words are going to still be important. So I still think you're going to be able to advertise on them, and they'll still be important, especially with your listing needs to be solid, at this point, even writing your own Q&As and stuff and doing that kind of thing, to get all that information in there wherever possible.
Yeah. Kind of sneak in, sending your employees or their families, be like, hey, go ask questions on there, and then we'll respond
Answer
to them
with keywords. Yeah.
I don't see that being a unreasonable strategy to kind of flood that with more info about your product. And like you said, the key listings have to be on point. You got to have the bullet points have to be all, I think it's like 250, 150 characters now of just information about this is what the product is. This is how you're going to use it. This is how it's supposed to be used. This is how it's going to fit into your life, all that stuff. So absolutely.
And your first search phrases might change as well. Like we just tested this the other day with our bike company, and their Google guys sent me Google search phrases, which are obviously completely different than Amazon. They're more of the question format. And so we popped them into Amazon just to see if we could get any traffic off them on high bids, And we didn't get a whole lot. I did get someone, I put one in phrase match, because it just kind of grabbed other keywords. But so it's not there yet, but I think that could be another opportunity there, just to bid on actual like question format phrases, like what is the best bike seat for somebody with back pain, something like that. You know what I mean? We'll see.
You say we'll see. This is only time will tell. Have you guys both heard about the story of why it's called Rufus, by the way, before I go any further?
I have not. I want to hear this.
Chris?
Yeah, I have, but I think from you.
Okay. See, my video about it. So apparently back in the day, like back in like the very early Amazon, they had when they first had one of their office buildings, there was a little corgi that ran around, and his name was Rufus. It was the dog of one of the higher C-suite executives, and it would just be he would just be a morale booster because he's a cute little corgi. And running around. And apparently also they would use his paw, like they would actually pick him up and hold him over the mouse and have him click when they were launching a new feature.
That's
so like he was the first. Yeah, it was a very cool story that I picked up. I think Amazon themselves put that out and said, hey, like here's the story of where we came up with this name. I'm pretty sure the icon for Rufus is going to be like a little corgi face. So I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet.
That is sweet.
Yeah, my dream dog is two female corgis, because I heard males are uncontrollable, and so I want one named Cannoli and one named Zeppoli, so Italian desserts, because they're kind of shaped like a cannoli and a Zeppoli maybe, so that's eventually when I settle down, find a house, and the market goes down a little bit, I can afford a house. That's a whole other podcast. We will hopefully get two dogs. Both corgis. So fingers crossed, knock on wood.
There you go.
But yeah. Looking ahead, also, again, another perfect segue. Looking ahead, not at my future, but at Amazon's future, Liz, what else kind of are we seeing maybe that's going to come out either this year or next year that's really going to maybe change the way that people do Amazon, people advertise on Amazon? Have you heard any things that you can share with us? Any talks, anything in your circle that's like, oh, hey, watch out for this coming out soon?
Not so much a future coming out, but I am really interested to see how their development of what they're calling like related, I think it's called related searches, and how that pertains to like match types. I posted sort of a tongue-in-cheek post on LinkedIn because if you're let me phrase this. Okay, so if you're aware, sponsored brands broad match. I'm going to make sure I get my ad types and match types not mixed up here. Always trigger these related searches, right? So example would be like if I'm advertising a baby blanket, maybe I show up for like infant swaddle or something. Like, yeah, those are related, So Amazon was saying like, hey, and a lot of us, to be honest, were just like, you know what? If that's the way it functions, I'm not going to use this. So there was a whole lot of us that didn't even use broad match in sponsored brand ads because what we found is it kind of triggered irrelevant searches. And sponsored product ads didn't do that. it could flop around, it could switch around things. You could add in keywords. There was a lot more options when it came to advertising on broad match and sponsored product ads. And then a little while ago, somebody went, wait, there's some weird stuff in my search term reports. And everybody went, that's not supposed to be there. And everybody asked their ad reps. And I trying to remember when I remember it was like a year ago now. It was a while. The entire ad community on LinkedIn was absolutely like blowing up. Like, what the heck is going on? Everyone who had an ad rep was talking to their ad rep. Their ad rep was like, I'll look into it. And nobody got back to anybody. And we're like, what the heck is going on? And then somebody went and checked the documentation on Amazon and said, oh, guys, they updated their documentation. And we went, what? Guess this is the thing now. And it seems like I'm not really thrilled with the way that these rollouts are happening. If they did an announcement, it was like, hey, there's this change, like that would be cool. Like, we're cool. But the way these changes are happening is somebody goes, that's a weird thing in my search term report. Have you guys seen this? And somebody else goes, that's a weird thing. And then eventually we check the documentation and we go, oh, they updated it. Okay, I guess it's a normal thing. It's not a fluke. And so that happened with sponsored product ads, with broad match. They added the related targeting into exact match as well. We're like, that was a weird rollout. Like, why are you doing exact match? Because exact match is not as exact as you would think it is now inside of a sponsored brand ad. Well, then they rolled it out to phrase match as well. Again, inside of a sponsored brand ad. So I'm like, I guess match types just don't matter in sponsored brand ads anymore. If everything can trigger anything, like, what is going on? And so most people are pretty cynical about it. If you ask anyone, they're like, Amazon just wants more of our ad dollars. They're just being crappy about it. And because it means more searches, more potential clicks, more potential ad spend, a lot, broader reach out of ads. And I was talking to some people who had context from Google Ads, and they said, well, Google Ads is moving very much more towards, them kind of triggering the searches and them having much more control over, again, like the search triggers. And the reasoning for that is because, at least Google's reasoning for that, so they were inferring that Amazon's reasoning was similar, was that because Google had so much more context, they were able to target better, and it created a better consumer experience because they had more context there. Now, the actual nuts and bolts of how it's working right now is if you are running sophisticated targeting ads and you already know what you're doing, you're going to be really displeased with the rollout, and it's going to make your life worse. If you are doing really crappy targeting and you don't know what you're doing, it might be doing you a favor and making your life better. So the thought was that as these new AI rollouts happen, as Amazon gets more and more sophisticated with their search and their newer developments, they're wanting their advertising to keep up with it. And because Amazon advertising is there's such a low barrier to entry in terms of what ad dollars you need to enter. I mean, yes, could you do more with ad budgets? Yes, but in effect, you could launch an ad for $1 a day. How many clicks you're going to get for $1 a day is nothing, but like barrier to entry is very, very low. So with that being said, low barrier to entry, lots of potential ads, lots of potential search triggers. They might be looking to take over in some ways, what kind of search triggers are happening through this new rollout and expansion. And that may marry into Rufus and the later AI searches. I think we're gonna have to keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Chris, I mean, any thoughts on, that's a lot. That's just a crazy transition from kind of what we know to what it's going to be. So Chris, any thoughts on how you see that playing out and how you maybe would change around your strategies if that takes big, not big effect, if the roots take hold on that?
It's kind of just annoying for me more than anything, because like if I want an ad to stick in like a single keyword campaign to stick in that spot because it's like a key term, now it's not necessarily spending money just on that one thing that I want it to. But I was gonna ask you, Elizabeth, have you seen any, like, are the modifiers combating that at all? Like, can you stop that by using modifiers?
I need to run a test on that. That was one of my comments to someone. I said, in a weird twist of fate, modified broad match may become the most defined search, which is counterintuitive. But that one I have to run a test on.
Well, I think that was a great episode. I think that was a great piece of content that we're going to be able to share with all of the Amazon, all of our Amazon sellers in the space to say, hey, have you heard about all of this stuff? How are you, getting impacted by this and all these other tidbits for them? Elizabeth, any final thoughts for our viewers for advertising in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, I would say stay sharp. Know your margins. Know how your margins back into ads. And I would say a ray of hope that as, we've talked about all kinds of complex topics today, and what is the future of AI, and is everything going to shift, and what is that going to look like, and where are we going to be, and who's going to survive? I mean, some really interesting, but also a little bit terrifying topics. I will say, if you are able to play it smart, there is always going to be a place for you to sell on the Amazon platform. And if you continue to focus on what Amazon is focused on, which is a good consumer experience, meaning you put thought and effort into your products, you put thought and effort into your listings, and then you are really focused on when it comes to my advertising, because advertising is paying for visibility. Where are my shoppers searching? In the future, that could be through AI, that could be through search, but where are my shoppers searching? Where are they looking for my specific product? And you make sure that you run ads so you can show in those places. And if you focus on those things, I'd say you'll be okay.
Chris, same thing. Any tips or tricks for our viewers as they continue to sail down the Amazon River, get it, in advertising?
I say embrace the change and learn it. Don't get left behind. Back when I first started, product display ads were just in vendor, and they were this little box you had barely any control over on the right-hand side. Now they're a great tool across Seller Central and vendor. And all these other things that are rolling out will be the same way. You just got to learn how to use it and accept it and go with it rather than, I find that people who fight against the Amazon system end up not doing as well, as those who understand Amazon and work with it rather than against it,
Absolutely. Adapt, or I think, what's that quote? It's a movie quote, adapt or die, which is a little harsh, but I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah.
So you can't beat Amazon. I know that's the truth. What's another movie quote? Sorry, death, taxes, and you not beating Amazon at their own game. 3 certainties in life. So, well, yeah. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode. I know I have gained a lot of insight into the advertising world, and I hope all of our viewers can as well. Really appreciate you coming on and just talking to us about the future of PPC and advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation.
Thanks everybody for watching. I'm Velocity Pete, and we'll see you next time.